Revenge films.
This is a story about the time that I got back at my mother-in-law who was outrageously rude to me over a cup of ramen. My name is Jessica and I met my husband Kevin when we were in college. We dated for about 4 years and then we got married. At that time, we had both left our small hometowns and moved into the big city for college. After a few years of marriage, we started talking about having kids. In that case, we wanted to move somewhere with a little more space. After I gave birth to my son, we decided to move back to my husband's hometown, and he changed his jobs to an office there as well. Before Kevin and I got married, I met his parents a number of times. However, I could count on one hand how many times I interacted with her, so I didn't have an opportunity to fully understand just how rude of a person she was. As soon as we moved into the same neighborhood as Kevin's parents, that was when I found out what a pain she was. After my husband went to work at his office and I sent the kids off to preschool, I would go to work 3 days a week at the local grocery store part-time. When my mother-in-law found out about that, she was pestering me to tell her my shift schedule. However, I knew if I told her when I would be home, she would definitely suddenly barge into the house, so I tried to avoid the question for as long as possible. But then my mother-in-law started coming over every single day. If she saw that I had finished my shift and was already home with my car parked out front, she would then ring the doorbell incessantly and barge into the house. In the beginning, I would answer the door, but as soon as she would come into the house, she would immediately start berating me. She would nag me about the way I was doing laundry, or if there was one single dirty plate in the kitchen. She would point out, and then she would start harassing me about what kind of mess I was, and about what kind of meals I was cooking at home. It was always just a shower of insults, and I hated it for a long time. I tried to pretend like I wasn't home, but then if I ignored her, she would see my car parked in the front, and she would come home at the front door and start yelling, "Jessica, open up!" And she would start banging on the front door. Unfortunately, to make matters worse, we lived on the first floor of an apartment building, and then she would come around and peek through the window. When she saw me, she would yell even louder, "I knew it! You are in there! You need to open up right now!" That window did have a curtain over it, but unfortunately, there was always a small gap that she would be able to peek inside. When I looked up, I saw my mother-in-law's glaring eye into the apartment, and it was terrifying. I thought about talking to my husband about it, but judging by my mother-in-law's personality on a regular basis, if I did that, she'd probably go into hystericals. And for the time being, I was still able to tolerate it, so I chose not to cause any problems. That was until one day I sent my husband off to work as usual and dropped the children off at preschool like any other day. I finished my shift at the grocery store and then I got home. Because I had been busy all day, I still hadn't had lunch, and so I thought about eating something real quick at home. But that was when I realized that I forgot to cook enough rice, and I started looking around the pantry to see if there's anything that I could eat quickly. When I opened the drawer, I found a cup of instant noodles and that my husband had stored away in case of an emergency. By that time, it was already 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so I thought it was a little snack to hold me over until dinner. Just as I was about to start eating it, I heard the sound of a doorbell. I already had a terrible feeling wash over me, but just as I expected, standing there was my mother-in-law. "I know you're in there, Jessica! Hurry up and open up!" She was yelling outside. Because her neighbors were nearby, I didn't want her to cause a scene, so I opened the front door. My mother-in-law was grinning from ear to ear as she came into my house. And as usual, she started looking for bones to pick. And that was when she walked into the living room and saw my cup of instant noodles that I was just about to eat. And then she suddenly raised her voice at me. "Are you kidding me? Is this what you're feeding your husband every single day? I can't believe it. This isn't real food." That was already rude enough to people who make cup noodles. Instant noodles are so delicious. And in the first place, it's not like anybody in our family was eating this every single day. And yet my mother-in-law had already made up in her narrative mind and to continue to come at me. "I had a feeling that you weren't cooking anything decent at home, and it looks like I was right. You were just buying things like this and slacking off, weren't you? You know, you're a failure as a housewife with this. Oh my, I feel so bad for my sweet son and my poor little grandchildren." Without even trying to listen to a single thing that I tried to say, she continued to ramble on. I was starting to get fed up with it, but then, without thinking, I had reached into the cup noodle and I placed one of the pieces of food onto my mother-in-law's forehead. As soon as I did that, my mother-in-law raised her voice again. "Yeah, what are you doing?" And she was screaming, so this time I reached into the cup and pulled out a different ingredient, and then my mother-in-law went running out of the house. To be honest, by the time I tried to eat the cup noodles, it was already pretty cold. And she had been talking for so long that I can't imagine there was any fear of her actually getting burned. But just in case, I wanted to make sure I covered my tracks, so when my cousin came home from work, I told him everything that happened that day. Of course, I did so by explaining everything that happened until that very moment, and I was being honest with him about the whole incident. I thought that he might get angry for me for crossing a line, but my husband's reaction was completely unexpected. He started to crack up.
"Wow, that's a masterpiece. I wish I could have seen my mom's face when you did that to her. That's hilarious."
"You're not mad?"
"Why would I be mad? It's obvious that my mom was in the wrong. I know that I haven't been able to help out much with the chores or with the kids because I'm always at work. And I know how hard you were working while also having a part-time job to take care of everything at home. My mom is the one I should be mad at for harassing you like that."
I'm not sure about this, but I have a feeling that your mom might try to contact you about it.
If she does, then that's perfect. Don't worry. There's nothing you need to worry about, Jessica. I'll handle it. If anything, I'm sorry that I had no idea that my mom was harassing you like that all this time. I'm going to take care of it, so you can leave it to me.
I was expecting things to turn out for the worst by my husband yelling about what happened. But that wasn't the case at all. Instead, my husband kindly took my side and apologized for everything that his mother had done to me until then. And he told me that he was going to talk to her so that nothing like this would ever happen again. I was happy to hear that my husband said that, but I was also worried whether it was going to work. But then, from that day forward, my mother-in-law completely stopped showing up at my door. Not long after that, I made sure to tell my husband that his mother really did stop coming over, and after I thanked him for it, I asked him how he did it. It turns out that Kevin had told his father everything that I had gone through, and that his mother was doing. And at that time, he gave his father the exact examples that I had told him, how she was nagging about how I cleaned the house, insulting my cooking, and how she harassed me for having 1 cup of instant noodles at home. When Kevin's father heard this, apparently he was furious. That was when I found out for the first time that apparently my mother-in-law was not good at cooking at all. Ever since I got married to Kevin, I had never actually tried his mother's cooking, so I couldn't say for myself. But the reason why there was a cup of instant noodles home in the first place was because his mother's cooking was so awful that he wouldn't be able to eat it, and he started eating cup noodles instead. Over the years, my husband developed a love for instant noodles, and since he moved out, he had no longer had his mother's food. As for his father, apparently he was trying to tolerate as much as he could. But sometimes there would be dishes served that were completely inedible. Anytime it was too terrible to eat, his father would also eat cup noodles at home, which meant the reason why Kevin had started eating cup noodles in the first place was actually his mother's fault. And yet, even though she couldn't cook well herself, she was trying to come after me for my cooking, and Kevin's father was furious. When I asked Kevin what was wrong with his mother's cooking to begin with, he explained to me that she didn't know the balance of flavors. At the same time, apparently she didn't like cooking recipes, so every single meal would turn out a disaster. For example, even if a regular housewife like me tried to create an extremely fancy sauce, I wouldn't know how much of what ingredient to mix in to make it taste good. So I would make sure to follow the recipe. However, even though Kevin's mother had no idea how to give flavor to any regular cooking, she would refuse to look at any recipes and just chuck in random amounts of random ingredients. Kevin said that both he and his father have tried to tell her countless times that she should just follow the recipe, but apparently she refuses to make things decided by other people. I almost find this stubbornness amazing. For the record, apparently Kevin's father would try to add his own condiments to make the food more eligible, but Kevin said that he gave up pretty early on. However, when he was younger, he couldn't afford to eat out every meal, and that he just started eating all kinds of cup noodles, and he got hooked on finding his flavor. But I could understand, especially where there are so many new products being developed all the time, and it's perfect for a midnight snack. But that reminds me, the first time my husband tried my cooking, I remember how moved he was, and he kept telling me over and over again,
This is the first time I've ever had such delicious homemade cooking.
I was happy, but now I understand why. I also remember once when I saw my father-in-law having a cup of instant noodles at the dining table of their house, and now I understand. After this incident, Kevin's father made it very clear to his mother that she was a terrible cook, and because he yelled at her that she needs to know her place and stop harassing me, he cornered her into tears. As a result of that, she didn't have to come into my house anymore, and I heard that she stays at home all day now. But for a housewife, I can imagine that it's devastating to hear your family tell you that your cooking is terrible, especially after you've been cooking for them all these years. Kevin said that his father also told her harshly not to ever speak to us about our lifestyle or the way I maintain the house, and that I don't need to worry anymore about her barging into our house. If she hadn't harassed me in the first place, and it never would have fired back into her like this. But she really did this all to herself. Take that!
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.